Bring his hat down a little bit to where it sits just above his nose. All kinds of things you could do with this. You could, considering the shape of his hat currently, you could give him a bill. I've got one of them as an idea for that. Is this guy, little guy here. You can see him. He's kind of got a little bit of a bill across the top there that lays down on top of his nose. So there's all kinds of possibilities. Your imagination is your key. So on the back side, let me start to bring this a little bit more into shape. Usually do a stop cut, cut into that. This will then relieve it so that if I cut straight down on this, it's not going past my bottom stop on the wood. Okay, I'm going to angle a cut into where I am because the hat sits over everything, so you wouldn't have this sharp cut curve of the hair going into the back of the hat. Okay, some cuts to bring out his feet. So one way to do this is I can take and draw a line a little ways in on both sides. And do the same thing on this side. I'm trying to be a little bit wide of what I really want because I can always make smaller. The thing about wood carving is you can make smaller but you can't make bigger. Coming in with a V-gouge, and I'm keeping one side of it perpendicular to this plane right here. So on the corner, you want to keep one side vertical as you cut down that. The idea is that these are going to be his feet, and they stick out exactly sideways and opposite each other. It's kind of odd, but that's the way the original looked to me to be carved. And it gives a little bit more interest to the piece. I mean, basically you're carving a head that looks only like it's going to be a head. Adding feet to it just add a little bit more novelty to whatever we'll call the caricature. So now you kind of have a foot over here. And you can trim him up, you can round him off, you can make it look however you want. You can actually have moved the ear up just a little bit and made it even bigger, and then played around with putting, I don't know, shoelaces on it or anything that's kind of your imagination. Although at this size, that's being pretty tiny, so I don't imagine you'd see much. And that's just taking out the piece of wood between the ear and the foot. So I don't know if you can see it in this one well enough, but you can kind of see that I just removed the wood from between the foot and the bottom of the ear. So we have separation. Anytime you can separate something on a wood carving, it actually makes it look better. I'm not going to say more realistic because obviously what I'm carving isn't realistic. So, and the same cuts can be done with a knife as the V-gouge. So I'm just going to kind of do the same thing and then cut down into the bottom, and that chip should come loose. Famous last words. All those fails. Just keep cutting. Okay. Down this side. This side. And key to doing this is always move the wood to whatever is the best advantage for you to carve. Don't try to force an angle on this if it doesn't feel comfortable. Carving should always be comfortable. If you're forcing a cut, then you're likely going to hurt yourself, because a lot of times that puts your knife in a direction that doesn't end well. And while I've cut myself carving, and well, I know a lot of other people have cut themselves, and this is the hard thing, is that I'm convinced that cutting yourself is not necessary to learn how to carve. But if you've gotten to this point, it's probably happened to you too. Alright, we have a fairly decent looking carving already. It looks a lot like some of the other ones I have. Now, I can already see some of the area up. So behind his ears, I'm going to take the V-gouge again. I got to drive this separation a lot further down than I currently have it. So this again removes the little, widens the ears out a little bit more. So they actually look like they're beside the hat instead of as part of it. And a lot of this goes by as dependent on your eyeballs. Never forget that what you see and what you're carving should all be one. But if it's not coming out the way you think it should, you may want to try something different. But it should be what you see, not what somebody else says you should be doing. Never be afraid to experiment. Okay, since the grain goes up, I'm going to trim these ears up from the bottom up. It's easier, obviously safer. Now I got some points on them. Same thing on this side. A little bit more relief on the front. Dry this in just a little bit more. So the ears were a little wide and fleshy over here, so I had to remove some of that to clean that up a little bit. Same with doing up here with the knife. As the face takes shape, you're going to find areas that you may have too much wood. So you're going to go back and remove that until it becomes more what you're looking for. I'm going to go back in and redo the eye sockets since they're not as deep as they were when I started. Come back in, cut that free. Right now I'm going straight back, whereas what would be nice is if I could get up under there and get a nice undercut. Give it a little bit more shadow, make it look a little bit better. And hopefully you've noticed that not all my cuts have the wood fall away immediately. A lot of them I go back and make a secondary cut to make it a final cut. The wood stays where it is until you get enough cuts on it that it'll fall away. So never be in a hurry to go flick wood here and there. I know it looks good, but it usually doesn't work that well. Okay. So he's got a little bit of character already. We don't know what his expression's going to be. That's still to be decided. Round his hat up a little bit more. Okay. Still a lot of carving to go. Not as much though, because I mean, most of the shape's there. Kind of make it look how you want him. Arches back a little bit, if that's what you want to call this part. Back of his head. And the hair goes back down into it. Make a few cuts here to kind of get a better idea that his hat sits on his head, not as part of his head. So you can kind of see what I was doing. And if you look at it from the side, the hat should look like it's naturally in that shape. If you've got lines that aren't following that around, feel free to go in and square them up. Like right here, it should start to turn up about here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that little notch out from behind the ear right there for his hat. And then the same thing, no, that side looks a lot better. That side's already turning up the way it should. Okay, so he's got kind of a couple feet. One's tinier than the other. You can always trim one down until you have no feet, and then you gotta stop. Let's do a close-up on this so that you can kind of see where we are. Hopefully the lighting that I have will give you enough of the shadows that you can kind of see the shape as I go. Alright, let's give him an expression. What worse could happen? One of the easiest ways to do this is to simply come across and draw, and I'm going to do a simple mouth. And almost anything you do with the pencil, it doesn't take much, and you can see where an expression can go. So I gave him a little bit of an upturn at the sides of his mouth, which means it looks like he's smiling, which is what I was going for. Now I could give him some teeth. I can do all kinds of things, and I do like doing teeth. Anybody that knows me knows that about me. Teeth are fun as far as I'm concerned, and they really give an interesting aspect to the expression of whatever it is I'm carving. So that's kind of become one of my favorite things to do. But in this particular case, we're just going to give him a simple little smile. Never worry about the pencil being exactly a certain way. In this particular case, as long as it's upturned toward the end, you're going to have that expression. And please do try different expressions on your own to see what works and what doesn't work. So one of the reasons that I curved this down here is because your mouth is not as wide as the side of your head. So the mouth will never come all the way over to his ears. So we have to round the mouth off here because it's going to curve back, and it gives it a little bit more of a dimension. So I use a V-gouge to cut along that line, and I'll give you a little bit of a close-up so that you can kind of see. Is you just kind of cut into it, and it starts the top and bottom lip. And you can work at it from there to try to make it look more of like a lip, little bit by little bit. And I'm going to show you how I go about making it look more like a lip. So I have another number 9. It's smaller than the one I had earlier. And I'm going to come up underneath his lip. So I'm going to start at the bottom of the corner of his mouth. And I'm going to kind of go down below. I don't want to get too close to his lip. I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to do the exact same thing from the other side. And as you can see, basically undercut all that. So the underneath, he's got that little curve that goes from the indentation from your bottom lip to your chin. Again, people don't all have it. Everybody's different. Thank God for that. So now I'm going to come back with a knife, and I'm going to curve that bottom lip a little bit. Give it a little bit of character. You got to be kind of careful with this because the grain's thin at this area and you can chip it out. I've done it many times. Then I'll come back and kind of do the top lip a little bit too. One of the things then I also kind of want to do, and this takes a little bit of practice, is to kind of take the knife in. You only want the point in, but you kind of want to run it down the very center where your V-gouge was. And like I say, the reason it's kind of hard is because your knife can slip a little bit. You only want just the point in. You don't need to go deep. And then you want a slight little angle up because you're going to try to cut out this tiniest little sliver. That does for you though is once that groove is gone, the piece you've taken out, his mouth now has, it looks like the top and bottom lips simply meet and that they aren't the same piece. So, gives him a little bit of character. Now, obviously this groove I've done under his chin is pretty obvious, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to de-emphasize that a little bit where you don't see exactly what the cuts are. Shape him up a little bit of a chin here. And you can kind of get crazy with this. You could give him whiskers. You could do all kinds of fun things. So as long as I'm trying to get another flat gouge or near flat, kind of come out here. smooth down the texture of it so that it's not quite as crude. Same thing over on this side. Kind of smoothing down a little bit. Got curves and bumps in here that I'd rather not have. Troublesome. Alright. Easy way to do that is just kind of bring it straight down into my stop cut. Same thing on this side. Just gives him a little smoother look to his face. I can kind of play around with the corner of his chin. Round him just a little bit. He's going to have a little bit more of a pronounced chin. Actually, I think I'm going to come in a little bit, take a little bit off of the width of his chin. So on both sides, I'm just coming down a little bit to narrow up his chin. And with my knife, I'm going to undercut the chin. Get a little bit of proportion. In fact, I'm going to do that to his body as well, or whatever passes for a body for this little guy. So he now has a little bit more of a face, and it looks pretty good.